The rain poured like it was trying to wash away every trace of loneliness from the city streets. The cafe windows were fogged, the lights inside warm and golden against the gray of the evening. Across the street, a young woman stood under a flickering streetlight, clutching a torn umbrella and an old handbag. Her shoes were soaked, her hands trembling, not from the cold, but from something deeper, the weight of disbelief, fear, and a quiet whisper that maybe she didn't belong here. Her name was Elena Carter, 24 years old, and today she was about to walk into what she thought was the cruelest prank of her life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the beauty of unexpected miracles, then pause for a second. Hit like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes one simple act of goodness can change an entire life story. Elena had never been on a date before, not a real one. Life hadn't given her the luxury. She grew up in a broken home, where dreams were luxuries and survival was the only goal. Her mother worked 2 jobs as a maid. Her father had walked out when she was 10. Elena studied hard, trying to balance books and bills, but no degree could compete with hunger and unpaid rent. When her mother fell sick, Elena dropped out of college and took a cleaning job at a local company. Ironically, one that cleaned offices of people who lived the life she used to dream about. So when her coworker, Jenny, joked about setting her up on a blind date with a handsome millionaire, Elena laughed it off. She had long stopped believing in fairy tales. But when Jenny handed her the cafe address and whispered that the man had genuinely agreed to meet her, Elena's heart hesitated between cynicism and curiosity. Still, she went, mostly because something in her wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone had seen her worth. The cafe door chimed as she entered, the warmth instantly wrapping around her shivering body. Her eyes scanned the room nervously. It was elegant, too elegant. Velvet seats, glass chandeliers, fresh flowers on every table. Every man inside wore a suit. Every woman looked effortlessly perfect. Elena, in her faded blue dress and borrowed heels, felt invisible. She stood by the door, pretending to check her phone, her heart pounding. Maybe it's a prank, she whispered under her breath. The thought stung more than she wanted to admit. She imagined Jenny and the others laughing, mocking the poor girl who actually showed up. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, a tall man in a dark gray suit stood up from the corner table and looked straight at her. His eyes were calm, observant, not mocking, not curious, just aware. He walked toward her slowly, each step echoing in her racing heart. She froze. He looked like someone from another world, sharp, polished, confident. Yet, when he reached her, he didn't smirk or speak arrogantly. Instead, he pulled out a chair and said gently, "You must be Elena. Please sit." For a second, time stopped. She didn't understand what was happening. No one had ever held out a chair for her before. Not out of respect, not out of kindness. She wanted to ask if this was part of some joke, but the softness in his voice made her pause. Slowly, she sat down. His name was Adrian Blake, a young CEO whose name she had often seen in headlines, but never imagined would share the same air with her. She couldn't even believe it was real. He smiled faintly, sensing her unease, and said, "I'm glad you came." Elena didn't know how to respond. She kept expecting the laughter, the reveal, the cruel punchline, but it never came. Instead, they talked. He asked her about her life, not out of pity, but genuine interest. He listened, really listened. She told him about her mother, about the endless nights cleaning offices, about her abandoned college dream. She tried to downplay her struggles, but her voice trembled anyway. Adrian didn't interrupt. He just looked at her the way no one ever had, like she was seen fully for the first time. Hours passed like minutes. The cafe lights dimmed, the rain stopped, and for a fleeting evening, Elena forgot what it felt like to be poor or unworthy. She laughed, she smiled. She even teased him about his perfectly ironed suit. For the first time in years, she felt human again. But when she reached for the bill, reality crashed back in. She couldn't afford anything on the menu. Panic flushed her face. She started fumbling in her bag, whispering, "I can't let you pay, please, I didn't know." But Adrian gently placed his hand on hers, stopping her. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You don't owe me anything." That sentence broke her. Not because of the words, but because of the kindness behind them. People had always wanted something from her. Time, labor, dignity. But this man, this stranger, only gave. After that night, Elena expected nothing. She assumed he'd never call again, that this was a fleeting kindness. But the next morning, her phone buzzed. A message. "I enjoyed talking to you. Lunch tomorrow." She read it again and again, her heart caught between disbelief and fear. She almost didn't go, but something inside whispered that she should. Lunch turned into coffee. Coffee turned into evenings in the park, and evenings turned into a quiet friendship that neither of them planned but both needed. Adrian never treated her like a project or charity case. He asked her about her dreams, what she wanted to study, where she saw herself 5 years from now. She laughed, saying she couldn't afford dreams. He smiled and replied, "Then maybe you just need someone to believe in them with you." Slowly, the world she had built around fear began to crack. He encouraged her to return to school, promising to help with fees as a loan, though she knew he'd never ask her to repay it. He introduced her to books, art, music, things she had never had time for. And through it all, he never once made her feel small. But the more she grew close to him, the more she doubted it all. Why her? She wasn't beautiful like the women in his world. She didn't have money, power, or status. She couldn't even afford to buy him coffee. The fear of losing him became her constant shadow. One day, as they sat by the river watching the sunset, Elena finally asked the question that had been haunting her. "Why me, Adrian? You could have anyone." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Because when I met you, you didn't pretend to be anything. You didn't care who I was. You were real. And real is rare." That night, she cried silently, not out of sadness, but because for the first time, someone saw her not as a burden or charity, but as enough. Months passed, and Elena's life began to change. She got a scholarship through one of Adrian's foundation programs, though she never told anyone about their connection. She worked hard, studied harder, and slowly began to rebuild her dreams. But life, as it often does, tested her again. Her mother's condition worsened, and the hospital bills grew unbearable. She didn't want to ask Adrian for help, not this time. Pride and fear tangled inside her. She started working double shifts again, skipping meals, hiding her exhaustion behind forced smiles. Adrian noticed, of course. One evening, when she nearly fainted outside the library, he caught her in his arms. She tried to push him away, embarrassed, whispering, "I'm fine." But he looked at her with quiet anger and said, "You don't have to fight everything alone, Elena." He paid the hospital bills before she could stop him. When she confronted him, he simply said, "Your mother deserves peace. And so do you." It was the first time she allowed herself to hug him. Not as a savior, not as a benefactor, but as someone she deeply, helplessly cared for. Their friendship turned into something deeper, though neither said it aloud. The way he looked at her said enough. The way she smiled when he entered a room said even more. But Adrian, despite his wealth, carried his own scars. Years of loneliness hidden behind polished walls. A heart that forgot what warmth felt like. Elena became that warmth. And then, one evening, he took her back to the same café where it had all begun. The place looked exactly the same. Soft lights, rain tapping against the window, and that same chair he had once pulled out for her. She laughed through tears, realizing what he had done. "I thought this was a prank that night," she whispered. He smiled. "So did I, until you walked in." For a moment, they sat in silence. Then he reached across the table, took her trembling hands in his, and said, "Elena, I don't care about your past. I care about your heart. You taught me what love really looks like. Humble, honest, and brave. So if you'll let me, I'd like to hold out that chair for you for the rest of my life." Her tears fell before the words did. And for the first time in her life, Elena said yes. Not to a miracle, not to wealth, but to love that saw her soul. If this story touched your heart, even a little, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it spreads the message that kindness still exists in this world. Speech balloon special request. Comment below what you would have done if you were in Elena's place. Would you have trusted a stranger's kindness or walked away in fear? Because sometimes the most beautiful stories begin not with perfection, but with courage to believe that even broken hearts can be seen, held, and healed. And that night, under the soft cafe light, a poor girl who once thought it was all a cruel prank finally learned the truth. Some chairs are held out not for formality, but for forever.